Hey y'all, it's Nikki. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am doing a full-on tutorial. This is going to be way too chatty. There's going to be way too much information. I'm going to talk about way too many products, but this was actually a request from Crystal. I will be going way too in-depth on how to bake, contour, and highlight your face. I want to give a disclaimer, I am by no means an expert at any of this, but this is just the products I found, the information I've come across, the tricks I've learned over the years. And I just want to share with y'all what I've learned, what works for me, and hopefully it can help you. To start off, let's go ahead and talk about what I already have done. Before I, bake, contour, highlight, do my foundation, any of it, I do my eyes first for several reasons. I start off with my eyebrows. I fill them in with my Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Wiz. I sculpt these bad boys out with that, and then I go into the eyes. So I will put down my eye primer, and if I'm setting it with concealer, I do that, and then I do all of my eyeshadow. And I always do my eyeshadow before my foundation because, one, I'm kind of lazy and I do use Scotch tape to get this very clean line. So if you have foundation down, you put Scotch tape down, and you take it up, you're going to take off the foundation with it. And I don't feel like redoing that, so I do my eyes first so I can do the Scotch tape. And the second reason I do my eyes first is because whenever I do all of my eyeshadow, no matter what brand it is, what type it is, technique, I always have fallout because I'm just a messy person. So instead of doing my foundation and then doing my eyeshadow and having all this fallout and having to, you can't wipe it away because of the foundation, so you're taking a brush and trying to dust it away and then you just end up with glitter all over your face. It just doesn't work for me. So I do my eyeshadow and then I'm able to just take a makeup wipe and wipe everything away. And one other thing I do before starting the base of my face is I do put on falsies if I'm going to wear them that day. I tend to be pretty expressive with my eyebrows. Not only that, I don't know why, I cannot help it, but whenever I apply false lashes, I'm sitting here trying to stretch my eyes open so I can get the right, angle. Anyway, the whole time I'm putting on lashes, I lift and move my eyebrows, and as you can see, I have some deep wrinkles. I've had these, honestly, as long as I can remember because I'm pretty expressive with my face. So if I have foundation on, it will crease really bad up here. And I don't want my foundation to crease before I even leave the makeup room. So I do my eyelashes first, that way I can, make as many faces as I want and not ruin my foundation. I have found that doing my eyes first really helps with the overall finished look. So let's go ahead and actually jump into the face. The first step for the whole foundation routine for most people is a primer. I do want to go ahead and say everyone doesn't need primer. I have seen several other YouTubers who don't use primer and their skin looks flawless, but some of us need a little extra help. Like if your skin is dry and flaky, if you have really big pores, if you have a lot of texture. Some people even do color correction during their primer process. I personally don't do that because I have so many freckles, it's just a lost cause for me. But for me and my dry skin, I have to use a primer or my foundation will flake off and I will look like a crusty alligator. So I do use the NYX Hydra Touch Primer. I've been using this for well over a year now, and it's gotten to the point where I don't even have any other primer in my drawer. I used to use the Smashbox Photo Finish Primer, which is great, but this is a fraction of the price and moisturizes just as well, if not better. So I always prime the face just to help get a little bit of moisture and help lock it in. It makes my foundation go on smoother. It makes it last longer. It locks everything in. I personally cannot go without primer. Again, it's not for everybody. Just take a minute to reflect on your skin type to see what exactly you need. And that's another thing I want to say. Everyone's skin is different. Everyone's routine is different. Just figure out what works for you. Anywho, so now that I have that done, I'm going to do the foundation. Not only is the type of foundation important, but even the tool you use to apply it to your face. Whenever I was in middle school and high school, I used to just straight up put foundation on my fingers and rub it all over my face and then go out the door. So I've come a long way, but there are several different things you can use to apply foundation. You can use either a brush or sponge, and I have a few. I used to exclusively use the Morphe M439 brush to apply foundation. This is a very densely packed kabuki brush, and it's great for spreading foundation across. This one doesn't leave bristle marks, so that is always a good option if you want to use your brush. I've got this one from Luxie. This is the Luxie 532 round top blender. I just used this in my Boxy Luxe video. If you want to see this in action, you can click the link up here. It's not as densely packed, but it still works pretty well for spreading foundation. And then of course, these were really popular for a hot minute. I just picked this one up at Marshall's. It's like the creme shop. But these oval brushes are also good for putting on foundation, so if you have one of those, that can work as well. But lately, my preferred method is a sponge. I prefer sponge because I feel like it just makes the foundation settle into your skin a little more naturally. And also, since I am baking, I have to use a beauty blender anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. But there are several different sponges you can use. This is my favorite. This is the L'Oreal Infallible beauty sponge. It's just, oh, I love it. It's really fluffy, very soft. The bottom end is rather flat, so it's great for putting on foundation, and then you have the pointed end, which is great for under eye and concealer. I do have the beauty blender. Whenever you wet this, it does get a lot bigger and a lot squishier. I honestly don't know why I got away from this one. I think it's because of the flat bottom for this, but this is still a good sponge, but it is a little pricey. I do also use the Flower Beauty Sponge on occasion. This one's really great. Again, it has the flat bottom, and it also has this flat edge right here, which can really help you get really clean lines whenever you're cutting out your contour or getting underneath the eye. But this is my true love, so I'm going to use the L'Oreal Infallible sponge today. I have already soaked this sucker. So basically, whenever you use a beauty sponge, don't just use it dry and go straight in. It's going to be too hard, too harsh, and it's not going to blend everything out the way you want it. But you do have to wet them. So take this and run it under water. I'll squeeze it and then slowly let it contract out to get more water, and then I do that a few times until it's completely squishy. And then I give it one good hard squeeze, get all of the water out that I possibly can. That way it's damp, but it's not, dripping everywhere, because if it's too wet, it is going to make your foundation clump. So be sure you get all of the excess water out of this. Now that we've talked about the foundation tool, let's talk about the freaking foundation. I have gotten in a rut. I really only use the L'Oreal Pro Glow foundation. This is a decent color match for me. It is drugstore priced, it is glowy and dewy, which really helps me out during the winter. It lasts pretty well throughout the day, it doesn't fade away, it doesn't crease that much. Whatever foundation I use, whenever I'm using a beauty sponge, I don't put it straight on my face, and I don't put it straight on the sponge either. I take a flat surface, I use my color switch and just use the top for it, and I put my foundation directly on that, and then I dip my sponge in this. I use my foundation on the back of my hand, but I mean, your skin is porous. It's gonna soak up some of that product. So I want to save as much product as I can, especially using a sponge, because a sponge does soak up some product as well. So I always put it on here, and then I dab it on there, and then I start spreading the foundation all over my face. I really wish I had more foundation recommendations. I have the Wet n Wild in there, which is okay, but I'm not a fan of it. I have the L'Oreal Lumi foundation. I have like the Maybelline Superstay. I do not have a single high-end foundation in my drawer. And that is because I am cheap. I mean, I'm sorry, it's the truth. I hate paying, $40, $50, $60 for a bottle of foundation, because foundation is one of the products I really run through, because you have to use so much to cover your face. That is one of the products, aside from my brow wiz, that I constantly have to purchase, because I go through it so quickly, and I'm not a fan of paying $40, $50 a month for foundation whenever I can pay, $12, and have a decent enough finish. I do hope to one day get to the point where I can afford to have bougie foundations. I just can't justify buying a $50 bottle of foundation that's barely gonna last me a month whenever I can go buy a $35 eyeshadow palette that I will literally use to the end of time. I'm weird about foundations, I'm sorry. It's just, I really hope, like, a 2019 goal of mine is to venture out into a few high-end foundations, because I honestly don't know what's good and what's not in that department. I only really play with drugstore foundations, and I know there are some really good, high-quality, high-end foundations out there. I'm just too afraid to try them. I have spread the foundation all over my face, as you can see. Always, always, always go down here and get the neck, because you do not want a foundation line. It's just not cute. I don't recommend it. So I'll, go all the way up here next to my ear, and then I'll go all the way down, and then just kind of drag it down my neck just to help blend the two. Because, I mean, it's obvious I'm wearing foundation, but I don't want it to be that obvious. Moving on to concealer. I have two concealers right now that I go for. I do have a high end. I don't eat concealer for breakfast like I do with foundation, so I do not mind paying a higher price for concealer. This is the Urban Decay Naked Skin in the color Fair Natural. I love this foundation because it's very high coverage, it does not crease, it's not too heavy, and it gets rid of, you know, my dark circles and my freckles. A cheaper alternative is the Catrice Liquid Camouflage High Coverage Concealer. This is of course drugstore priced. It's not quite as good as this one. If you're like going to an event, I would wear this one, but if you're just wearing this, I don't know, to go to the grocery store or whatever, if you really aren't too worried about a completely flawless face, you can go for this. It doesn't crease or anything. I just feel like this is a little more comfortable, a little more natural looking. So once your foundation is done, you're gonna put in your concealer. And everyone does this differently and has a different amount they like to wear. Just kind of figure out what you're comfortable with. But I start with a little like 3-prong right here. And this is more than enough. And if you're really wanting to highlight your face, I suggest putting a little bit on your chin, the center of your nose, and then do this little doohickey up here, because whenever you're highlighting your face and you just do underneath your eyes, it's gonna kind of wash you out and look a little unbalanced because those are the only places that are highlighted. So if you do the center of your face as well, it helps to balance everything out. I'm just going to take the pointy tip of this and just blend all of that in. And for the under eye, I take my time. I start to spread out the concealer, and then I really try to get as close to my lashes as possible, because you don't want a big gap right there to give you away and make you look tired. I'm just going to dab, go all the way to my nose, all the way to my hairline, and then I kind of bring it down to help blend it into my foundation. One thing about a sponge that I do not like is that if you have any kind of blemishes or bumps, I found that whenever you're applying it with a sponge, the foundation or concealer doesn't really like to stick on top of textured parts of your face. So I do go back in and I put, the smallest amount of concealer on the areas that need to be concealed. And then I will go in with a clean finger and just barely dab it in. Also, a lot of people, they'll put on concealer and they'll even blend out their concealer with their fingers too. Whenever you don't have any tools, honestly, your fingers are one of the best tools out there. You know, I'll use it to blend in my concealer like this whenever I'm spot concealing. I use my fingers to put on shimmers and metallics on my lid. There's something about it, just the warmth, and I don't know. There's some kind of science behind it that I am not privy to, but I know it's there. Now that I've spot concealed, we can start setting the face. As soon as you're done with all of your cream products, you go and set the face. If you're doing like a cream contour, a cream blush, a cream highlight, you need to do that after you do your foundation and before you set everything. If you do your foundation, you set your face with powder, and then you try to go back in with the cream product and you try to blend it out, it's going to grab onto the powder and it's going to start getting patchy and look like a big old mess. So always do all of your liquid and creams before you do any powders. But since I do not currently do like cream contouring or anything, I'm going to go ahead and set the face. If y'all want a cream like contour, blush, highlight tutorial, let me know. It's not my usual go-to, but I do know how to do it, so I can give you some tips and tricks on that as well. Most people by now would go ahead and set the whole face, but my skin's a little different, so I do things a little bit out of order. My under eyes crease very easily and very quickly. You know, I have laugh lines, I have crow's feet. I've had a very jolly life so far, even though I'm only 26, so I do already have, you know, some wrinkles going. Not ashamed of it, but they are there, so I do have to do makeup a little differently. I am going to go ahead and set the under eye, that way the concealer doesn't have time to start creasing. You can just use the powder that you're going to set the rest of your face with, but I personally prefer to use the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. I like mixing these two together. This has a very big banana undertone, and just using it by itself is a little too much for my skin, but whenever I mix both those together, it just really highlights my under eye, and I don't know, it makes me look more awake. I typically always use a brush. This is a Rose Beauty multi-purpose brush. It's just pointed and fluffy, and I feel like it really helps to get all the way up to the lash line. So I'm going to, I barely tapped into these, and then I'm going to just press that in. You never want to swipe with this kind of product. You want to press it in and make sure you really get it into the skin, that way it doesn't crease. Now that that is done, I'm going to go ahead and set the rest of my face. There are several different products you can use. Most days I use the Bare Minerals Translucent Duo. This is a pressed powder, and I prefer this because it gives me a glowy finish without making me look glittery or anything. I got this in a BoxyCharm. You know, you don't have to go out and buy Bare Minerals because it is kind of pricey. You can use the Maybelline Fit Me. This is a loose powder. I mean, you can use pretty much any kind of loose or pressed powder. It's whatever your skin likes. Like, this is the Pretty Vulgar Powder Room Matte About You loose powder. You can use the Tarte Smooth Operator Amazonian Clay finishing powder. You got a lot of options whenever it comes to setting the whole face, which is different from baking. So we do need to set the face before we bake, so bear with me. Because you can't bake the whole face. I mean, you can, but that's just not really recommended because it's really gonna dry you out. So I am gonna go in with the Bare Minerals with a fluffy powder brush, and I'm just going to dip into both of those. And I'm again going to press this lightly into the skin. I'm not gonna do it too much because we are baking today. And again, you don't want to drag your brush across your foundation too much because this is where you set your foundation. This is where you make it lock into place. I will drag, you know, bronzer and blush brushes over my skin, but that's because I've already locked it in with the translucent powder. Oh my lord. But once I lock everything in with the powder, I can go do that. I'm going to get pretty much the whole face. I'm not going to go back into the under eyes since I already set that with the Kat Von D palette. And I am going to make sure I get the neck. Now that we have set the face, we can bake it. So in order to bake, you do have to have a loose, translucent setting powder. Any of the ones that I mentioned earlier will work, but my favorite is the RCMA powder. I got this online. It is fairly cheap, and I've had this for a long time, and I have barely used any of it. But I do have to admit the packaging kind of sucks because it's like a freaking spice shaker that you get out of your kitchen cabinet. It's kind of messy, and it's really hard to get the powder out and not make an absolute mess. So, I've never had another translucent powder that ran out. I popped out the little sifter plastic part that's usually in there, and I put all of the powder in here. That way I can dip my sponge directly in this and not make a huge mess. So with that same damp beauty sponge, I'm going to dip the pointed part very, very generously in here. I'm not going to tap off any of the excess, and I'm going to directly press this underneath my eyes. I know this seems scary for a number of reasons. One, why on earth would you mix a powder with a damp beauty sponge? Won't it clump up and get crazy? Not necessarily. It took me a long time to get over that mentality, but a damp beauty sponge is definitely the best for this. This looks crazy, but we're not going to leave it forever. So I'm just going to grab more powder and do the other side the same way. If it gets a little messy, if it gets on your nose, don't worry about it because in the end we are going to wipe all of this away. So the reason this is called baking is because whenever you put translucent powder on like this, whenever it's a very, very heavy layer, it traps your foundation, your concealer, your setting powder all together underneath this translucent powder, and it cooks it. Your body heat will literally cook the foundation, the concealer, the setting powder, and mold it all together and make it bulletproof. This is something you want to do whenever you're going to an event, whenever you're gonna, you know, be under hot, bright lights all day, if you're gonna be outside a lot, if you really want your foundation, your concealer, any of it to last, this is what you do. I personally don't do this every single day because it is a bit of a process, but the results are a huge difference from your normal routine. While the under eyes are baking, we're going to bronze and contour. Anytime I put on foundation, I bronze no matter what, but I don't always contour. So today I will show you both. As far as bronzing products, there's a whole slew of stuff you can use. You can, of course, use the Kat Von D Shade Light Palette because it has multiple colors. The Physicians Formula Butter Bronzer is so good. It's, I don't want to say cheap, but it's still kind of drugstore price. And it smells like summer vacation. This smells so good. It's really buttery, obviously. A very good formula. I've also really enjoyed the Revolution Vivid Big Bronzer in the color Golden Days. It's got some luminosity to it, so it's not just a flat color. If I'm only bronzing, I will typically go for this one because of the luminosity, but if I'm bronzing and contouring, I don't want to do a luminous bronzer and then a flat contour color because they'll kind of fight each other. Another good bronzer is the Tarte Amazonian Clay Waterproof Bronzer. This is the color Park Avenue Princess. It seems pretty dark on camera, but it does not come out too bad on my pale skin. But today, since I am bronzing and contouring, I'm going to use the Kat Von D Shade Light Palette. You don't have to go get this. There are plenty of dupes out there. I just happened to pick this up at either a Ross or Marshall's for a fraction of the price. So as far as bronzing, there are a couple different brushes I use. I think this was a Morphe, but there's no writing or anything on it. It is a very fluffy brush, but as you can see, it's got like a domed top, because the point of bronzer is to spread it around and give you a healthy glow, not all over, but over a good portion of your face. But recently my go-to has been the Aesthetica P12. It's very fluffy, very soft, and it's slightly more pointed, but I like this one because it keeps me from packing on the product too quickly. I am very heavy-handed and I have a really bad habit of grabbing too much product too quickly, putting it on, and then going, oh crap, there's too much, and then I have to sit there and try to blend out for about 10 years. So this is fluffy enough to where it really disperses the product and keeps me from doing that. The Kat Von D has this dark color, which is honestly too dark for my skin tone. And then we have this more bronzy orange color and this light taupe color. For bronzing, I'm going to go into this color right here. Be sure to always tap off the excess, and I'm going to start bronzing. So I do start off with the forehead. I get my hairline up here, and I go all the way across, and then I drag it down, and then I start doing it underneath my cheekbone. I am so pale that I need a flush of color, so bronzing is very, very important to me. So I'm going to hit basically the hollows of my cheeks right here, and I'm being pretty haphazard with it. It's okay if you brush some of this away, it's not a big deal as long as you don't get, you know, really up close up here. And again, I'm being pretty messy because we're going to clean this up here in a minute. I'm going to just very generously kind of buff this in, go back and forth, go in circles, make sure you don't just have a harsh line, kind of spread it out a little bit. And I'm also going to put it underneath my chin right here to help deepen up the shadows and make it look a little more slim. I just find that for me and my face shape, it's a little more flattering to go ahead and add a little bit of bronzer down here as well. Once you're done bronzing, if you want to go back and add that powder back in, you can. It's not really necessary, but if you're OCD, I understand you can go ahead and do that. Now that we've bronzed, I am going to contour. You always want the contour color to be basically a little bit darker than your bronze. This is so orange and this is so taupe. I like to do this as my contour because contour is when you really chisel things out and make not a dramatic line, but a more defined line. I find that doing a darker color than your bronze definitely helps with that. For contour, you can use any number of brushes. My go-to is the Morphe M523, but this does pack on the product pretty quickly, so you do have to be careful with that. That's why I also like this Me brush that doesn't have a number or anything. It's the same shape, but it's a little fluffier, which keeps you from packing on too much product too quickly and helps to feather it out a little easier. And then you can also use something like this crown brush. It's slanted, again, pretty wispy, but that's good for getting into that cheek as well. I'm going to use my Morphe M523 and try to use a light hand. I'm going to dip into this taupe color right here, tap off all that excess, and then I am going to do a fishy face and find my cheekbones. So as you can see, whenever I do that, this is really where my cheek sinks in, so that's where I'm going to concentrate the product. So I'm going to start at the hairline and slowly drag it down, but you don't want to drag it too far. If you drag it too far to your lips, it's really going to sink in your face. It's not going to be flattering. So typically, what I normally do is from the edge of my eye up to my hairline, that's really where I concentrate it, and then I just kind of fluff out the excess. So I'm going to start swirling it right here. You want the most product to be closest to your hairline and then have it go lighter and lighter the further you go out. So I'm going to concentrate most of the product up here, and I'm going to just barely drag it out. As you can see, this makes my face look a little round. I know that happens, we're going to fix it in a minute, but this is very important. Learn the shape of your face. Learn what's flattering to you. Most people can just do this and they're done, but I know because of just my round, rosy cheeks and everything, this just makes me look, you see that dimple, it just, that doesn't really work, so we're going to clean it up. So taking that RCMA powder yet again and my L'Oreal Infallible sponge, I'm going to dip, and we are going to clean up the contour. So I'm going to start right here, right under that big line. You don't want to go too far up and erase everything you just did, but you don't want to go so far down that it doesn't really get you the line you need. So I kind of see where I want my cheek line to be is like right here, even though the product goes down further. So we're going to clean it up. So I'm going to take the sponge, and don't put too much pressure, else you're not going to put powder down, but just lightly put a little bit of pressure down and drag it. Grab more powder if you need to, perfectly fine, and I'm just going to cut this line to help clean everything up. Another reason why I do this is because of my face shape. If the bronzer goes too far down, it rounds out my cheeks. So if I do this, it will get rid of the bronzer that's leading up to my mouth, and it will make this go and make it look a little more defined, a little more chiseled, and not round my face out so much. And then I will go ahead and kind of drag it all the way down because I don't want a stark white line and then the bottom of my cheek is kind of dark. I don't know. And some people who have a lot of problem with like oil or creasing on their chin or up in their T-zone, they will also take whatever's kind of left over on the sponge and kind of press that in as well to help with those areas and to keep them from creasing or getting oily. Oh my god, I told y'all, I'm messy when it comes to makeup application. Oh, and also, if you're like me and you have some really, really deep smile lines, adding a little bit of powder there as well helps to keep it from creasing as much. I love that makeup is a beautification process, but you tend to look like a psychopath while doing it. Okay, so while my cheeks are baking, I'm going to go ahead and wipe away the stuff underneath my eye. Just grab a very fluffy powder brush and start sweeping it away. Typically, whenever you bake, you only need the powder to sit there for about 5 to 10 minutes. You don't need to sit there for 30 to 90 minutes and let this bake because that will dry out even the oiliest people. But I have just found that doing my under eye and then my bronzer and then my contour area is just the best order for me. So while this is baking, now that my cheeks are free, we're going to go ahead and blush and highlight. So for blush, again, there's a ton of different brushes you can use. My two normal are the Morphe E4, which is a slanted fluffy brush. I like this because you can basically just stamp on the blush and that's it. There's not a lot of fuss. I also have the R&L Moda Pro. I got this in one of my subscription boxes, don't remember which one, but this is the pointed blush. This is really good, but I have found that this, for some reason, packs on more product quickly, so this is my usual go-to. But whatever brush you have will work. As far as actual blushes, you know, I've got the, of course, Tarte Blush 101 book, which has pretty much every color you need. It also has a highlight and a bronzer, but I do like this because, I mean, no matter what eye look you have or whatever looks you're gonna do, you have an option. You have the, you know, the roses, the peaches, the apricots. I mean, whatever you're going for, this will have it. But this isn't the cheapest thing in the world, and I get it. So you can also do the BH Cosmetics Nude Blush 10 color blush palette. This is an oldie but a goodie for me. It's a great price, and again, you have pretty much every color you need. You've got some mattes, some satins, some shimmers. I used to only do complete matte blushes, but recently I've been kind of liking the more luminous colors because I had it drilled into my head that only the highlight should be glittery, everything else should be matte flat. But having a little shimmer in your bronzer is okay. Having, you know, some shimmer in your blush is okay. Honestly, whatever you want to do is okay. Whatever tickles your fancy that month, go do it. I am going to dip into the BH one. I'm going to dip into this more luminous color right here. Tap off the excess, of course, that way you don't put on too much too quickly. And I'm going to find my lovely, lovely cheeks, start dabbing on the apples, and then I'm going to lightly blend it upward into the contour. And if you feel like you're a little too heavy-handed, that's okay. Just take a powder brush and start blending it out. So now that we have a nice flush of color to the cheeks, let's do my favorite part of the whole look, which is the highlight. You don't have to highlight your face, but I personally enjoy looking like a glazed donut. There are both great drugstore and high-end highlighters. The Wet n Wild Mega Glow powders are fantastic and they're pretty cheap. I've also been loving the Mirabella highlighter in the color Swirling Pearl. I love this because it has a pink and gold shift to it. It's really pretty on my skin tone. Of course, you've seen this bad boy. This is the Tarte Skin Twinkle Volume 2 palette. I love this one because not only is it a very bright and pretty highlight, but you have multiple colors and you can layer it on. Most people can just put on one highlight color and they're done, they're good to go, but I have found that layering your highlight for me and my skin tone, I don't know, I just like the result better. So there are a lot of different highlighting brushes out there. This is from SL Miss Glam. This is from Ipsy. This is the B36 tapered highlighter, very good highlighting brush. Also have this also from SL Miss Glam. This is the SL41. This isn't tapered, it's more flat, but it is great for packing on highlighter as well. And then you have the Luxie 522 tapered highlighter, which is the fluffiest and most rounded brush, but I prefer my Morphe M501. This is very wispy, so it really spreads out the highlighter without putting on a really harsh streak really quickly. And it's tapered, so it helps with precision without making it too precise. I'm horrible at explaining things. I'm sorry, guys. So, for highlighting, we're going to go into the Tarte Skin Twinkle Volume 2. I'm going to start off with Spotlight right here. Candlelight is a little too dark for my skin tone, but I'm going to start off with Spotlight. So basically, the darker the highlight, the more I blow it out. So I'm going to put this really all over my cheekbone, and then I'm going to go down to Daylight and do it in a smaller area, and then I'm going to go down to Skylight and do it in an even more concentrated area. You'll see what I'm talking about. So for Spotlight, I'm going to start hitting the cheekbone. You don't want to put it into your contour because that's kind of, you know, you're trying to make dimensions. You want this to be darker, this to be lighter. Contour the cheek, but highlight the cheekbone. It's all about layering and, you know, the way the light hits your face. So I'm going to put this on the cheekbone. I'm basically going up to my lash line. I'm not going all the way down to my nose, but getting pretty close. And I'm going to swirl it up here as well. So now I'm going to dip into Daylight right here and not quite go as far out as the previous one, but still be just a little bit messy with it. Because since I don't have like really prominent cheekbones, I have really prominent cheeks, not cheekbones. So I want as much light to be caught up here as possible to give the illusion of cheekbones. Now I'm going to dip into Skylight right here and get really just the top of my cheekbone right here. And if this seems like a lot of highlighter, that's because it is. I mean, that's the look I prefer. You definitely don't have to do this much, but I like being seen from outer space. One thing about highlighting that's important is you don't want to put it on your cheeks and just leave it. You'd also want to highlight the center of your face as well. So whatever is left on my brush, I will hit the tip of my nose. Some people like to dip their finger in the highlight and then go all the way up the nose, which is really pretty on them. But I have so many large pores on my nose that it just makes it look worse. So I don't do it. I only do the tip of my nose. The thing about highlight is that it highlights things. Meaning, if you have texture, if you have large pores, it's going to exaggerate them. So again, just learn your skin type. I'm also going to put just a little bit above my eyebrows right here. And then I always, always, always hit the Cupid's bow. I very lightly pucker out my lips and brush that on top before I put any lip product on. Highlighting your Cupid's bow basically makes your lips look bigger because you see how the light is now catching, you know, these little dips that you didn't see before. This just gives your lips a little more of a pout. So it's like lip filler without the needles. And now that we are done highlighting, we can go ahead and brush away all of this. As you can see, I have I don't want to say sharp line, but definitely a much, much cleaner line. Because translucent powder not only sets everything, but it can kind of act as an eraser if you do it this way. Now that we are done with all of that, I can finish the eyes. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, if you can tell, I did not do my lower lash line. As you saw, you know, I was putting foundation up there, concealer, powder. If you already have your lower lash line done with your eyeshadow and eyeliner and everything, whenever you go to blend everything in, you're just going to smear it everywhere. So I wait until I'm completely done with the under eye before I finish the lower lash line. And now I do the lips because, as you saw earlier, you know, I put foundation everywhere. I did the highlight. If you do the highlight while you have lip gloss on, you're going to ruin your brush. So wait until you're done with your whole face to do lips. This is just the Tarte lip paint in the color Serenity. And then the very, very, very last step is setting spray. Setting spray is pretty important. It locks everything in, you know, your foundation, even your eyeshadow, your highlight, all of it. It helps your makeup last longer. It, for me, gives me a dewy finish because I do use the Milani Make It Dewy setting spray and gives it a really pretty finish. Of course, a lot of people use the, you know, MAC Fix Plus, which I have some. It's great, but it's kind of pricey, and this gives me more of a dewy finish, so I do tend to go for this one. The Urban Decay, I used to use the Chill. I think it's like the all-nighter now. That's a good one too, but I just feel like for the price, this works just fine. And the mister is fantastic. It has a really nice fine mist. I just love it so much. I'm sorry this wasn't, you know, as fun as my normal videos. I typically goof off a lot more, but I just now realized that I went into teacher mode. I was really trying to get information out and be precise, because I talked about a lot of crap. I mean, a lot of brushes, a lot of products. My area is a complete mess and packed with stuff. But this is my current baking, contouring, and highlighting routine. I'm pretty sure as time passes, I will learn more tricks, I will get better at it, and it will change. And it's not perfect by any means, but this is just what works for me. I hope this video was at least a little helpful and didn't bore you to death. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. If you have any other requests, let me know too. I am perfectly happy to do any kind of requests y'all have. You can also hit me up on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. Everything is Nikkikkins. You can check out the description box below for the links and spelling of that. And be sure to subscribe to my channel before you leave so you can get notified whenever I do more tutorials, reviews, whatever I end up doing. And that's it. I love y'all, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!